Welcome to episode 9 of the Reparations study group hosted by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. This is Jesse Nevel, and I'm joined by Jackson Hollingsworth here. Uhuru Jackson. So where are you right now, Jackson?
I'm in San Diego, California, where the movement has one of the largest growing branches of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, and it's also where I was born. Union del Barrio is also headquartered here, with which the African People's Socialist Party has had a 35-some-odd relationship with. So it's a very great place to be. So that's why I'm calling in. And thank you to Jesse for hosting this episode of the Reparations Study Group.
My honor and my pleasure. And thank you, Jackson, for continuing to participate even from another time zone. We appreciate that. And so just wanted to kick it off with that little impromptu interview with Comrade Jackson to satisfy the curiosity of any of our regulars who are wondering where Jackson is and what I'm doing sitting here. So just wanted to get that out of the way and just want to welcome everybody who's tuning in. This is the weekly study session of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to organize in the white community for reparations to African people. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement exists all throughout the country, as well as in London and other places throughout the world. And we are very honored to be a constituent organization of the African People's Socialist Party, which is a worldwide African revolutionary organization fighting for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere, fighting to end the conditions of colonial oppression and genocide that characterize life for African people inside this country and throughout the world, and fighting for national liberation and self-determination, reclaiming total control of all the vast wealth and resources of Africa and African people. So we are studying on this study series that we hold every single week here on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's YouTube and Facebook pages. Please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't already. We study the Burning Spear newspaper, and I am holding in my hands here the February 2020 issue of the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the African People's Socialist Party's official publication that they've been publishing continuously since the late 1960s. So this newspaper has the distinguished reputation of being the longest running Black Power African revolutionary newspaper in the whole world. And this newspaper, as I mentioned, is published by the African People's Socialist Party, whose leadership is Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairman Omali Yeshitela is pictured here inside of every issue of the Burning Spear newspaper, and he also authors a regular column in the Spear called The Point of the Spear. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is our leadership. We salute the chairman. We honor his incredible leadership and stance, and we honor the chairman for fighting almost, in some cases, almost single-handedly for over 50 years to rebuild the Black Revolution that was crushed in the 1960s, to push back against the counterinsurgency war that saw so many African leaders and organizers and revolutionaries assassinated or jailed or forced into exile, and who fought against the grain and against all odds to rebuild the Black Revolution and to build a worldwide African revolutionary movement, and who also formed the political philosophy of African internationalism, the political theory that guides all of the work of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, including the work of the Uhuru Solidarity movement. So this is not a study carried out by white people who think we're smart or that we have good opinions about things. This is a study carried out by a constituent organization of the African People's Socialist Party in the form of the Uhuru Solidarity movement that's designed to extend the discussion that the party is initiating about the world, seeing the world through the eyes of the African working class into white society, into the white population. And looking at the world through the lens of the African working class means seeing the world as it really is, as opposed to seeing it through the distortion of our narrative, our falsification of history that forms the white worldview and justifies our position on the pedestal of slavery, colonialism, and genocide. So we salute Chairman Amalia Shatella. We also salute all of the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party, who we have the incredible honor of working under their leadership, including Deputy Chair Onizane Shatella, who leads the economic front of the African People's Socialist Party and whose department is responsible for over 50 economic institutions, which are not just businesses that exist to raise money, but are actually part of the fabric of the emerging independent African workers' anti-colonial, international, anti-capitalist economy that the Uhuru movement is forging in the process of building a new world and fighting for socialism under the leadership of the African working class. So we salute Deputy Chair Onizane Shatella, and we also want to salute everybody who makes the Burning Spear happen, including and especially the Director of Agitation and Propaganda, Akile Anai, who presides over the entire media apparatuses of the Uhuru movement, including radio stations and publications of books and pamphlets and so many other things. And one of the most important and oldest institutions of the Uhuru movement is this newspaper that I hold in my hands right now. So we want to salute the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party, and I also want to give a special shout out and salute to our direct leadership in the Solidarity movement, which is Chairwoman Penny Hess, who has been working under the leadership of Chairman Amalia Shatella and the African People's Socialist Party since 1976, when Chairman Amalia Shatella called the founding conference of the African People's Solidarity Committee to organize white people of the oppressor nation under the leadership of the African Revolution to extend the African Revolution into the white population. Chairwoman Penny Hess was there, and she's here today, and she has led for over 40 years to show the highest example of what it means to be a white person who takes the stand of unconditional, principled, material, revolutionary solidarity with African liberation and self-determination. So Uhuru to Chairwoman Penny Hess. And before I stop talking, I want to give one last salute, which is to my comrade Jackson right here, who, in addition to being the USM St. Pete chair, also coordinates this incredible study and makes it possible for us to have these discussions every single week here on Uhuru Solidarity Movement Facebook and YouTube channel. Uhuru.
Uhuru, appreciate that, Chair Jesse. Salute you, our incredible national chair, Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right, so let's jump in. So if you've got your copy of the Burning Spear newspaper, or I don't believe this article is online yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
So you'll have to just follow along if you have not yet received your copy of the Burning Spear newspaper. But we'd like to read from an article that is published in our Solidarity column that we're very honored to have in the Burning Spear every month. It's called White Solidarity with Black Power, and it's edited by Chairwoman Penny Hess. And it's on page 11 of the Burning Spear newspaper. So, Jackson, you have the article? Okay.
I do.
So I was thinking we could switch off, go back and forth between the different sections that have the headings in bold.
Totally.
All right, so I can kick it off. This
Okay.
article is called How Chairman Amalia Shatella Defined the Revolutionary Basis for Reparations. We're going to read through this article. We're going to give you a quick report back from an incredibly historic conference that just took place here in St. Petersburg, Vanguard Up, the national conference, the plenary conference of the African People's Socialist Party. And we're also going to talk about the ideas and themes explored in this article. And more than anything, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your comments. We want to encourage your participation in this discussion. That makes it a reparations study group, is if everybody who's watching actually participates, engages, sends in your questions. Please feel no reluctance to ask anything that comes to your mind relating to the article that we're going to be discussing tonight. Okay, so how Chairman Amalia Shatella defined the revolutionary basis for reparations. Chairman Amalia Shatella's work to make reparations a household word was a bold and revolutionary act. The chairman's strategy has forced the reparations question into the mainstream discussion. It is urgent that we internalize the chairman's revolutionary definition for genuine reparations and how this informs the call to the white community to build the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. More than 40 years ago, Uhuru movement founder and leader, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, made the explosive statement that reparations is more than simply a payout from the US government. It is a function of the revolutionary struggle of African people to reclaim control over their resources and achieve self-determination and political economic power over their lives. Chairman Omali Yeshitela's goal for the African People's Socialist Party was to take reparations out of the classrooms and courtrooms and reclaim it as a demand of the African masses, a revolutionary demand.
Uhuru. Party tribunals brought reparations to the forefront. The party held the first World Tribunal on reparations in New York in 1982 in Brooklyn to indict the U.S. government for its genocide against African people. The tribunal calculated that $4.1 trillion were owed to African people, the equivalent of $14 trillion today. The party's World Tribunal used international law, such as the UN's Human Rights Charter, on behalf of the colonized, oppressed African population to expose that African people inside the U.S. are a colonized population living under the foreign, hostile domination of the U.S. government. As the people's advocate at the tribunal, the chairman explained that the verdicts of the tribunal were legitimate, that African people do not yet have the state power to enforce. Winning state power is the task of the African People's Socialist Party. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela has proven, the entire economy of capitalism is based on the assault on Africa, the enslavement of African people, and colonialism around the world. Reparations are owed for more than the period of chattel slavery in the United States, but for the ongoing oppression of African people that forms the foundation of the social wealth and opportunity available to all strata of the white population. Uhuru.
Reparations in practice. The party builds APSC and USM. As the chairman has written, and this is a quote from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, every white aspiration and dream, every expectation for happiness and a good life, from a successful marriage to a secure future for their children, requires drone strikes in Pakistan, police murders, and mass imprisonment in African colonies and barrios of the U.S., and starvation and forced displacement of the oppressed throughout the world. The party's founding of the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976 opened a new front of the African Revolution behind enemy lines, as the chairman says, by recruiting members of the white oppressor nation population to work under the party's leadership, going back into our own white communities to build the movement for reparations. Material solidarity, rather than empty gestures, was required. Our responsibility is to raise resources for the work of the party as a concrete expression of our commitment to reparations. This is how we can begin to right the historic wrongs of slavery, genocide, and colonialism that built our lives at the expense of Africans, indigenous, and other colonized peoples. Chairman Omali Yeshitela's theory of African internationalism has proven that the struggle is not against racism, the ideas in the minds of white people. African people are a colonized nation, dispersed around the world, fighting for power in the hands of the African working class.
Expose opportunism, build principled solidarity. In this period, as the demand for reparations is gripping the masses of African people and becoming a material force, some white opportunists are latching themselves to the reparations issue to build their careers and serve the reformist agenda of liberal imperialism. A spat of white-led faux solidarity organizations have been formed that proclaim to raise money, quote, for reparations, despite having no accountability or relationship to the Afghan Revolution whatsoever. One such organization even attempts to redefine reparations as a patriotic endeavor intended to preserve the, quote, soul of the United States. Nothing could be further from the goals of the Afghan People's Socialist Party and the struggle for real revolutionary reparations. Indeed, Chairman has made clear that, quote, U.S. imperialism cannot survive a successful struggle for reparations, end quote. It is more urgent than ever that the Afghan People's Solidarity Committee and our mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, recruit the masses of white people to unite with the chairman's call for a stand of genuine reparations under the leadership of the Afghan working class, as opposed to the new political fad of reparations racketeering by white left and liberal fraudsters. APSC and USM represent the legitimate stand of reparations for white people because we are a constituent organization of the party and a component of its strategy to win Afghan liberation and unification. The chairman wrote in the call to the 2020 Afghan People's Socialist Party's plenary, quote, since our 7th Congress, there has been an exponential leap in the growth of the anti-colonial solidarity movement under the party's leadership. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement exists in more than 130 cities and 30 states within current U.S. borders. USM is spreading and winning the demand for reparations and fracturing the reactionary solidarity of a politically backward, parasitic colonial population. End quote. Uhuru.
It's time for the reparations uprising. We must join the fight to bring reparations to its ultimate conclusion: freedom and self-determination for the African community, the precondition for the advent of genuine socialism, where no one lives at the expense of another. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement has a critical role in this as the strategic front of the party inside of white society. USM must take up the party's call to target the moneyed sector of parasitic capitalism, including the colonial prison industry and the genocidal diamond trade, to pay reparations to the African Revolution through material support of the party's more than 50 programs and institutions of African self-determination and economic development. Reparations is concrete. African people's resources hoarded in the white world must be turned over to the Black Power Blueprint program of the African People's Education and Defense Fund, transforming the lives and conditions of the African working class in North St. Louis and beyond. As APSC chairwoman Penny Hess wrote in a column published by the Burning Spear newspaper in 2018, quote, reparations is a worldview and a campaign that is only possible through joining under the direct leadership of the organized African working class in the form of the African People's Socialist Party. It is a way of life of action in defense of the African working class and the right of the African nation to struggle for the unification and liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. To register for the USM National Convention, April 18th and 19th in St. Louis, Missouri, go to uhurusolidarity.org, specifically usmconvention2020.eventbrite.com. Build the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Reparations now. Uhuru.
Uhuru. And I want to salute Chair Jesse, who wrote that article. Really want to salute you and, really laying out, the significance of, who we are as, the Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the party, Uhuru.
Uhuru. Yeah, so let's discuss this article.
Yes.
And Jackson, did you want to kick that off?
Yes, I also want to appreciate Virginia Wilson, who says, Uhuru, salute Chair Jesse and Comrade Jackson. And Kristen Forthun, who's left a comment that disappeared from my view, but I know that Kristen Forthun was really, saluting the studies that are every week, and Kristen
Great.
tunes in every week, and salute her. And a lot of other people are tuning in as well. Celestina, who is from San Diego. A number of comrades all around the country are also tuning in, having some technical issues on looking at Facebook right now. So I lost a few names there, but I want to appreciate all of the comrades tuning in from, Seattle and Spokane and Portland and St. Louis and everywhere that you are. And I wanted to, ask people to share this video, message it to a friend who's been asking you about the movement, so that we can, share this political education, this discussion with everyone. And I really want to appreciate this study, Chair Jesse, and, how it really lays out what reparations is, because there's all sorts of talk, when you ask someone on the street what they think of reparations, so often I hear, well, it's a complicated issue, and, it's really not all that complicated. And some people say, well, it's complicated because, how much is it, which we've, the party laid out a long time ago, a number, but honestly, you can't really quantify it, is what the party has also said, in terms of just the absolute trauma and horror and the myriad of ways that African people are oppressed and attacked on every single front. But also, what would that look like? And does it go to just quote unquote African Americans, or who does that go to? And the party lays out, all Black people are African people, and U.S. colonialism and European colonialism has assaulted African people all over the world, and has forcibly dispersed them all over the world. So I think this answers a lot of people's questions, and is very a lot of the points hit in this article have been laid out in prior writings and speeches before, but I really appreciate it being so direct here, and the focus, because I think this will really help readers and people watching the study, and also organizers be able to better articulate the party's stance on reparations, what reparations really is, a revolutionary demand, that it must go to the Uhuru movement, who is leading the African liberation movement, the vanguard, and be able to answer people's questions and really build. So many people are now saying, "I support reparations," but they don't necessarily know how that will look. And you can see reparations in the form of the new Uhuru House in St. Louis, Missouri, and just every program of the Black Power Blueprint, and so many other programs of the African People's Socialist Party. So I think it's a really important article that all of us should read over again and study in our meetings, and take to the masses of people, take to our neighbors and families and people on the street. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Yes, I completely unite, Jackson, and I wanted to ask if there are any comments or questions that have come in. I know you were saying that you were having technical difficulties. I don't know if Kyle is able to see, or no.
I see. So I haven't seen any other questions, but I do see a comment that Virginia just made. This is why it is so crucial to be under the leadership of the revolutionary vanguard of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party. The party lays it out very clearly and answers the why and how. So I appreciate Virginia commenting with that. And here I'm going to refresh on Facebook. I don't see any comments on YouTube yet.
Okay, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just want to encourage people who are watching to send in your questions. Again, the reason why we hold these studies publicly is for brand new people who've never heard of us to find out more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and who we are and what we believe and what we do, and also to give our current members and supporters an opportunity to ask questions that you might have and not know where to bring them. That this is the place to bring your questions. If there's a question that somebody that you're trying to organize keeps nagging you with, you can bring that question here, or something that your mother or somebody keeps bringing up every time you talk about the Uhuru movement and you're not really sure if you're giving the best answer. You might be, but if you're not, we're here to help and to help arm you ideologically and politically with the theory of African internationalism to be the best organizers that we can be. And also, if we don't have the answers for you, to direct you to which books you can read, which speeches you can watch, which studies you can attend, including O'Malley Taught Me every Sunday that the chairman holds on Sundays at 8, and Chairwoman Penny Hess, who's going to be holding a monthly study. Places where you can bring your questions. So what I wanted to comment on with regards to this article is just the historic character of the period that we're living in right now, where it was just a few years ago that we were still considered sort of on the outside politically for talking about reparations. And I'm talking as somebody who's 30 years old, who joined this movement when I was about 20. So I can't even imagine how it feels for people like Penny Hess and Kitty Riley and others who were around in the 70s organizing with the Uhuru movement in its early days, when the party was starting to do the work of resurrecting the cry for African independence and rebuild a movement around that. And there was no discussion whatsoever about any of these things. It had been sufficiently crushed, and it had been really just stamped out by the counterinsurgency. And as the chairman has said, 2 generations went by without the masses of the people having a clear, visible example of a revolutionary cadre organization to look up to and to set the terms for struggle in the world. And the party has been steadily working since then, doing mass work, building organizations, building fronts, building campaigns, and is now able to fully emerge openly as what it has always proclaimed, which is that it is the vanguard of the African Revolution. And being the vanguard means being out front. Like the chairman calls it the advanced detachment. That's a military term, which means that the vanguard actually goes into battle first, even when the rest of everybody else is not ready. The vanguard goes first and paves the way and makes it possible for everybody else to fight. And of course, the party is always involved in winning the masses, and the chairman has always said that the people are the ultimate shapers of history. So it's not like the vanguard operates independently of the people. It's involved in leading the masses, but it's involved in leading. That's the point. It's the leadership. And the chairman has always led on every single question, including the question of reparations. And I think it's important for us to understand that the chairman's goal was to make reparations a household word, including in the white community. So as annoying as it might be to see reparations being thrown around by people like Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer and billionaires, Democrats who are running for president, it's something that we should recognize as actually the consequence of the work that we've been doing under the leadership of the party to make reparations the new litmus test. That's what we've always said. That's literally what we said. We said, from now on, you don't get to call yourself a progressive without answering the question, where do you stand on reparations to African people? So that struggle has been won, but the question, the task before us now is that now that democratic space has been opened up and white people's minds have been broken open to be able to hear the word reparations and not immediately react with a knee-jerk reaction, but say, yes, I support that. Okay, that's reasonable. I agree with that. Now we have to go out there and take it a step further and say, okay, if you agree with reparations and you're white, then you need to be a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, because we are the reparations people. We are the organization of reparations under the leadership of the African Liberation Movement. And this is the movement that's been around since 1976, raising the question of reparations in the white community and understanding that reparations is not a favor, it's not an act of charity, it's not another name for affirmative action or welfare programs or financial assistance to low-income communities, quote unquote. That reparations means repairing the damage. And really repairing the damage means standing in solidarity, in material solidarity with oppressed African people in their quest to take back everything that belongs to them and build a different kind of world in which African labor and resources do not go to build life and opportunity for somebody else, but go towards producing life for African people themselves. That's what reparations means. Reparations is about money, but it's also about a stand that we take politically and in every other way in solidarity with the African Revolution. That's what the call for reparations means to the white community. And beyond that, the other thing that we have to win that nobody else is talking about is that reparations is not just something that should happen for somebody else, quote unquote. It is actually in the interests of white people to take this stand for reparations, to fight for reparations to African people. And it's not in our interests as white people, quote unquote, it's in our interests as human beings, beyond what it means to be white. Because what it means to be white is to live off of, to profit off of the suffering and exploitation and theft of resources of Africa and African people. That's all it means to be white. We're not literally white colored, people, where it's white is a political and economic identity born out of a sense of sameness built on the economic interests of slavery and colonialism, and that's what the chairman has explained. So as people, though, as human beings, being white is not in our interests, because white power is the enemy of humanity, and humanity around the world is doing everything it can to rid the planet Earth of that enemy, to rid the planet Earth of the system of parasitic capitalism and imperialist white power that is hell-bent on actually annihilating the Earth itself in its endless pursuit of profit for the white ruling class. So do we want to go down with imperialism, which imperialism will go down, it is going down, it must go down, or do we want to be part of the future? Do we want to be on the side of the rest of humanity that's fighting to build a socialist world in which every child has a future, in which every elderly person is treated with respect and not just discarded into a nursing home or something like that, where there's no homelessness, there's no environmental destruction, there's no mass spreading of diseases that result in thousands of people dying. All of these things would be solved in the context of a world where the interest of human beings are the guiding principle for the economy, for science, for everything, as opposed to the interests of a tiny minority percentage of the world population who gather riches and fortune off of the suffering and exploitation of everybody else. That's the kind of world we want to live in, and that's actually in our interests. And Chairman Omali Shatella has explained the word opportunism. We throw that word around a lot. We say, oh, that's opportunist. But there's actually a political definition to the word opportunism. Opportunism doesn't mean like, oh, you see an opportunity for yourself, so you jump on it or something like that. Opportunism means, it's a political term that means you will abandon the long-term interests of the whole, of the collective, in pursuit of the short-term interests of yourself or of a small group. That's what opportunism means. You will sell out the long-term interests of the whole, which includes you, for the short-term interests of the few. So opportunism is actually a death wish, because oppressed peoples are not going to stand by and just continue to be oppressed for another 600 years. They're going to do something about it. They are doing something about it. So, relinquishing our opportunism, relinquishing our ties to a brutal, savage, destructive world economy and casting our lot with the oppressed peoples of the world is not a punishment on us. Reparations is not a punitive measure. It's actually our liberation as well. It's our entry point into being genuine internationalists, genuine socialists, and being part of the revolutionary struggle to build a world without oppression. So reparations is the basis for a genuine revolutionary and progressive stance from white people. And I know I just said a lot of stuff, Jackson, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. I do want to say a few things a little bit later about what does this mean this year? This article mentions one of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's mandates from the amazing plenary conference that we just had, that the party just held, is that we have to go beyond just talking about reparations to other white people at farmers markets and door to door, although we do have to do that. But we also need to go door to door to the Fortune 500 companies, and be demanding reparations at the doorsteps of the white ruling class and the moneyed sector of parasitic capitalism. And there's some specific targets that have been set. So I do want us to talk a little bit about that, in this study as well. But I'm going to turn it over to you, and for your input on this as well, Jackson.
Certainly, Uhuru. First, I want to appreciate Raymond Moses, who says, "Greetings, comrades from Trinidad in the Caribbean, Uhuru, Uhuru." And I also want to salute Casey Mackey, who is the St. Louis chair of USM, who's tuning in and sharing. Mads Ambrose, who is the Portland chair. Evan Garner, who is in Asheville, North Carolina.
Evan, Uhuru.
Yes, Uhuru. And after refreshing, I'm now able to see Kristen's earlier comment. This is Uhuru, Reparations Study Group, smiley face, victory to the African working class and all colonized and oppressed people around the globe. Uhuru.
Uhuru, right on.
Yes. I want to make a self-criticism. We don't have more people here on this study. As the coordinator of this, I'm responsible for, in addition to, the program, etc., making sure that people know about this study. So clearly I have to up my game, and also invite, anyone watching to, join this committee so that we have, more hands on deck and can get more done. But I commit myself to making sure that, really upping my game on letting people know about this study, because I know that people do want to discuss reparations and what they can do about it. So I'm going to make sure people have the opportunity to join. I do appreciate everyone who's been sharing the video. So I appreciate, especially Virginia and Kristen and Casey, who I know have been sharing a lot. So appreciate you. Virginia comments, "Thank you, Chair Jesse. A great explanation of what reparations means." I particularly want to appreciate, Chair Jesse, what you said, that, white is an economic and political identity, because that's what we have, made ourselves into and are maintaining. And that, in laying out the definition of opportunism, that is so important, that as a society, we white people are opportunists.
Exactly.
And I know that, and we have to, overturn that in order to see a future for the planet, for ourselves, for humanity. Let me see here. I had my little bullet points. What you were saying, Chair Jesse, about really taking this on, not just on talking to people on farmers markets, and our typical outreach tabling, which definitely needs to keep happening in a larger way. Yes, knocking on doors needs to keep happening and happen more often. But also really taking this demand to the, what the party describes, the chairman describes as the moneyed sector, saying, the movement has been saying, the chairman has been saying for years and years how all white people owe reparations, that is so true, every single one of us. And we take that demand not just to the larger white population, but to the people who are really in the quote-unquote moneyed sector, and the people who are really exerting control over this colonialist system. I know that you want to discuss the prison industry and the people who are CEOs of those industries, and so many others as well, but that one in particular for obvious reasons, and how the plenary of the African People's Socialist Party is really calling on the solidarity movement to do that, to take it to the moneyed sector, because we as a society owe lots of reparations, and the movement needs them desperately for so many things, and we don't want them to be held back in what the movement is able to do and accomplish and be able to grow as, because they don't have their resources that we have in our communities, and that we have the ability to demand from our own white ruling class. So,
Uhuru.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about this because, this is something that, like you mentioned, Jackson, Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been really calling for this for a few years now. And now more than ever, the strategy of going to the moneyed sector has to be front and center for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And I want to give some specifics on what that means. And, I just want to unite that this doesn't mean we're switching gears. We're going to continue our work to organize amongst the general white population because we understand that, in the grand scheme of things, white people are the moneyed sector of humanity because of the blood money that we all enjoy access to in varying levels, that has been ripped off from African people and indigenous people, and this is the land of the indigenous people that we occupy as colonial settlers to this day. And all of this land must go back to the indigenous people, and all of Africa's resources must go back into the hands of African people, and imperialism must be destroyed, and all white people sit on the pedestal of imperialism, of the oppression of African people, of what Chairman Omali Yeshitela quotes Karl Marx as referring to as the primitive accumulation of capital, also known as the capital that was not created by capitalists, but that was acquired by white colonizers in order to create capitalism, which was what? African human beings. So we're not going to let up on our work to go. In fact, we're going to escalate our work in the general white population in terms of door-to-door, in terms of tabling. And I really want to salute Comrade Jackson here for being one of the star recruiters on tables and even phone calls, recruiting people on the spot to become sustaining members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And we all need to be like that all the time. We need to be, like the chairman says, we need to be reparations evangelists in the white community. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But yes, go ahead, Jackson.
I'm sorry, we do have a question.
Okay.
That I'm sorry I missed earlier. Virginia Wilson says that sometimes I don't know how best to explain it to my friends on social media or people I meet who may say, my family is second generation Irish or Polish, etc. Do I get reparations too?
No.
Because I really want to respond in a winning way. So basically asking, how do I best respond to someone being like, well, my, Irish family, Polish family, etc., was oppressed, and I'm second generation. Do I get reparations too? People who say that, how best to respond to that?
Well, I mean, how you respond to it will probably depend on the context and who the person is and stuff like that. But I think politically, what we understand about that question is that, I think it's important to remember what the chairman has said, that African people are the only people in the United States who did not come here looking for a better way of life. With the exception of the indigenous people who were already here and whose better way of life was taken from them by white people, and now they suffer on concentration camps referred to as reservations in horrendous, abject poverty and genocidal conditions. But back to the question, is it true that Irish people faced oppression in Ireland under the British Empire? Absolutely. I mean, the chairman has has never denied that. In fact, he went to Ireland in the 1980s during the so-called Troubles and met with the Irish Republican Socialist Party in Belfast and declared unity in the anti-colonial struggle against the British Empire that the Irish struggle was waging. But he did so under the condition that the Irish Revolutionary Socialist Party would also claim its solidarity with African liberation inside the U.S. And they made a statement that they believed that the U.S. owed reparations to African people and that they would reject any funds sent to them by Irish immigrants in the United States who supported the Irish struggle but did not support the African struggle inside the U.S. The Irish Republican Socialist Party said, we don't want your money, you keep your money because you can't support us but not support the African Revolution. That doesn't make any sense. But that's just, I wouldn't necessarily respond with that if somebody asked me, but I think that's an important just piece of history to know. That, yes, is it true that Irish people faced oppression in Ireland? Sure, it's true. Is it true that Jewish people experienced oppression in Eastern Europe? Sure, it's true. In Western Europe as well. Is it true that various sectors of white people, even Italians and others, may have experienced some discrimination and what have you after getting off the boat at Ellis Island in the early days of coming to the United States? Sure, but each and every one of those European immigrant populations was able to overcome those obstacles and those whatever prejudices they may have encountered from other white people in the United States by stepping up on the backs of African people and becoming fully united with everything that it means to be white. With, plenty of Jewish merchants set up shop in the African communities of New York and other places in order to start generating wealth and resources in order to climb up the ladder and fully integrate into white America. The Irish in this country were among some of the most vicious lynchers of African people who participated in sadistic lynch mobs targeting African people, mutilating their bodies, burning them alive in broad daylight. There were plenty of Irish working class people who were in those lynch mobs, and the Irish workers would often chase African workers out of the unions and say that the Africans were trying to take their jobs and stuff like that, and would sometimes even target and murder African workers who would, go to work even though the white workers were doing a strike or something. The African workers were like, well, I need to feed my children, so I'm going to work. So then these white Irish workers would say, oh, they're a scab or whatever, and then target them and murder them, These kinds of things happened all the time. And, that's the history. Honestly, we have people like Kitty Riley. She's of an Irish ancestry, and she's spoken on this many times in the Solidarity movement, that when she looks at a picture of a white lynch mob, she sees Ireland staring back at her from almost every face in some of those pictures. So, and she's, seeing her own people, her own family and stuff like that. And, so I think the simple answer to the question is no. Irish people, would not in the U.S. would not receive reparations, and other white immigrant, Europeans who came to the U.S. would not receive reparations. However, the reparations struggle and the African Revolution is the way to end even the forms of oppression and pain that have been experienced by white people, including what happened to the Irish. That the ultimate payback that any of those groups can get against a white power system that may have persecuted them, and in the case of Ireland, actually colonized them, is to join in solidarity with the African Revolution. But no, all white people sit on the pedestal. All white people owe reparations, including Irish white people, including Jewish white people, including all white people. All white people owe reparations and have a responsibility to fight for that and to win others like ourselves to take that stand. I hope that's clear. I know that was kind of jumbled. All right, so can I jump back to the prison thing? How are we doing on time?
Yes, we will have
6 minutes.
A minute left.
Oh my God.
Before,
never mind.
We're at 4:54 right now.
Okay, never mind. We'll get to it. We'll get to it next week.
We need to discuss that. Virginia answers all caps yes. If we all want to be free, it's reparations that will do that. Uhuru. So I really want to appreciate Virginia for asking that question, and your answer to Jesse that I know that a lot of people have to contend with. So we have only 3 announcements very quickly, because I know Chair Jesse, you have to get going to a very important meeting. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement 2020 National Convention, called Reparations Uprising, is April 18th and 19th in St. Louis, Missouri. And you can register at the link that our moderators are posting in the comments. Here we are. And I encourage everyone to come out there. That will have a lot of training on how to organize for reparations, and of course incredible presentations from Chairman Amalia Shatella himself, from Chairwoman Penny Hess, and from our national chair Jesse Nevel. So I hope to see everyone there. And let me see here. We have hashtag Omali Taught Me Sunday Studies, 8 a.m. Eastern, at the links provided, where you can hear directly from Chairman Amalia Shatella on a number of issues. So weekly studies with Chairman Amalia Shatella encourage everyone to tune into those. And of course, our next episode of the Reparations Study Group, you can RSVP at the link provided. Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right, so I guess I will close it out here. So, Uhuru, just want to thank you, Jackson. I want to thank our engineer, Kyle, and everybody who tuned in for your participation, for your questions. And let's get more people into these studies every week.
Yes.
You know, let's have study sessions locally in your cities, gather people around, and make it really participatory. You know, this is not like we do web shows, and those are, we like engagement as well, and we do a reparations in action show and stuff like that. But this show is different to the, you know, in the sense that we really, really want to push for engagement. We really want to push for people to be involved in this and for it to be a genuine study group. I mean, anyway, so that's what I wanted to say. I really want to encourage you to do that, and I want to encourage you, if you're not already, to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to become a sustaining member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I'm a proud sustaining member. I do $30 a month to the work of the Uhuru Movement, Black Star Industries, the Black Power Blueprint, African Self-Determination and Economic Development programs. That is a concrete stand of monetary reparations that we can take every single month as sustaining members. And it provides a critical source of stability and infrastructure to the work of the party to build the new African economy under the leadership of the African working class. So that's what reparations looks like. So if you are for reparations, I encourage you to go to uhurusolidarity.org/join-USM or just uhurusolidarity.org and click join and become a member, become a sustaining member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement before the night is over. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
All right, so we'll see you next week on the Reparations Study Group. Uhuru.